Welcome everyone to another edition of CelloConnect. I'm Peter Romney. I'm the cellist based here in St. George, and with me today is Liz Maxfield. Liz, how are you doing today?
Great, how are you?
Awesome. So right before we started, and I'm sure everyone who watches this video is going to ask the same question that I did. You are at home right now, and you also have an organ behind you.
Yes, yes, this is my quirky music room. My husband and I are both musicians. He's a composer and pianist and organist. I'm obviously a cellist. Um, and we, about 8 years ago, when we were thinking about moving to Utah, we happened upon this house that was like advertised as, mid-century house, 2 bedrooms, apartment in the back, acoustically engineered music room. We said, what? So we had to check it out, and we we kind of joke that this house moved us to Utah. So it's an acoustically engineered music room with a pipe organ, and it came with a 9-foot grand piano. So when it isn't COVID, we have house concerts here as a way to support musicians who are touring through, who usually don't stop in Utah Valley, sometimes never in Utah.
Right.
So we've had hundreds probably of concerts
Wow.
and shows here, and events and things like that over the years.
At the risk
And
of playing favorites, do you have any really memorable ones?
oh, yes. Well, we've it's been quite the variety. We've had a fantastic cellist, Andrea Claysaddle, came and did a fantastic solo cello um, recital, and that was really wonderful. We had Salt Dance Company come and do a couple nights of dance in the round, so it was really fun. We've had um, DJs, we've had jazz bands, but probably my favorite one for me as a folk musician was we had Daryl Anger come. He's a fantastic fiddle player, and he came and did a show here, which was it was just magical. It was a lot of fun.
Oh wow, that's amazing. So it's a fairly big space then. I mean, I guess it would be if it's engineered for to have an organ in it.
Yeah, we can fit probably 50 people in the room.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So any traveling musicians out there, if you want to make a stop in Provo,
Yep.
I know a guy.
You know who to call. As soon as we can get rid of this pesky virus, we'll be doing it again.
True. Yeah, that's true. Very good. Okay. Well,
I remember this moment when I was probably in third grade, second grade or third grade, and I was just starting to make friends with new people. It was a new school. Yeah, it must have been third grade, I guess. And this girl said, "Oh, I play the violin." And I said, "Oh, cool, I play the cello." And she said, "Oh, really?" And I'm like, "Well, I mean, I'm a musician." And she said, "Oh, cool. Well, who's your teacher?" I'm like, "Well, I don't actually have a cello." And it was really interesting in that moment. It's like, oh, I I am a musician, even though I'm not doing it yet.
mm,
And so at that point, I asked to start taking music lessons, and um, I really loved it. Um, I studied with Patty Pinkston, a beloved teacher here and in Provo. But while I was studying classical with her, I was also playing folk music. My family was pretty musical. My mom played the harp, folk harp, and was a singer. And my dad played the guitar and Irish drum, called the bowron. And I have 2 sisters. One, Becca, who played the flute and penny whistles and was a singer, and Katie, who's a fiddle player. And so we had a little family band called Fiddlesticks. And it started as just a way, my mom was always in bands when I was little, and it was kind of a way to collaborate with her, and she really wanted to include us in her passion of music. And so we started playing together. My mom passed away when I was 10, so about a year after we started playing together. And so then the music, the folk music that we were playing together, kind of took a more meaningful turn, I think, for me anyway. It was a way to kind of connect with my mom and to continue her legacy. It was also kind of therapy for my family. It was something that my sisters and my dad and I could do together that was positive, even when things were really hard and when we probably wouldn't have spent time together otherwise. So music became a really important part of who I was in my family, and then who I was in terms of becoming me. And so I didn't really think anything of it that I was playing classical cello and folk cello, because that distinction hadn't really been drawn for me, just by proximity to other versatile instruments. And it wasn't until I was a little bit older that I started realizing, oh, I only know 2 cellists. Of all of the cellists I know, I only know 2 cellists who play folk music. It kind of became a challenge of like, well, what would it look like for the cello to be authentically Irish, or what would it take to adapt my playing and also fiddling of the Irish tradition so that it could be compatible. Mm-hmm. So throughout my teens, I explored that a little bit further. I ended up at Berklee College of Music, but I primarily went to study with Eugene Friesen, who's a fantastic cellist. He is one of the great cross-genre modern contemporary musicians, right? He can play anything. He feels music so deeply, and he's just a fantastic cellist. I kept feeling like, this is great. I was learning all sorts of things. I was expanding my repertoire, but I wasn't doing Irish music. There was a little bit of Irish available. I took lessons with fiddler, singer, or songwriter, Mark Simos, and we dove into Irish tune writing, which was really fun. But I just felt like I wanted to dive deeper. So I kind of took a plunge and applied for a Fulbright grant to go study in Ireland and, go to the source. I wrote a proposal based on writing a method book, which is something that I'd been interested in as I was kind of honing this idea of classical cellist Irish music, and where those two intersect. So I ended up receiving this Fulbright to go study in Ireland at the University of Limerick, where I got to study with all of the best fiddle players in Ireland. And it was amazing because the University of Limerick program, how it works is at the beginning of the semester, they say, well, who are your favorite Irish musicians? And you write a list and they say, great, those will be your teachers this year. And they'll fly them in or bring them in, and you do a workshop with basically whoever you want. Or they'll say, oh, well, we've got, Cuivan O'Reilly is coming through. Do you want to do a workshop with him? Yes. Okay. It was just amazing. Alec Finn is coming through. All of the greats of Irish music. And they were also open to saying, okay, well, you're not playing the fiddle, but we will teach you anyway. It was really great. And so I took all of that and used it to write a method book, the Irish cello book. that was published after I got back. Um, and it was just a really wonderful journey. It was really great to synthesize all of that information I got in a way that hopefully can help cellists who don't have the exposure to Irish music in an authentic way, help them figure out how to play it in a way that feels fun and exciting and true to the original genre. Well, I think so often when we see like Irish tunes written out on a page, they just look kind of boring
Yeah.
because the notes aren't that complicated, right? It's maybe a couple of string crossings there, but and then so often as classical musicians we end there, right? We read what's on the page and then we're done. But with Irish music, the notes on the page are just the beginning, right? And so you need to learn how to interpret them, how to manipulate them, how to make them really fun.
That actually kind of that's a great lead into my next question, and actually it answers it a little bit. Which being in the Suzuki world as I am, which is all about taking young children and starting them down the path of being a classically trained musician, not for the sake of making them a class, not for the sake of producing classically trained musicians per se, but like to teach them the disciplines of being a classical musician. So it really emphasizes the discipline of everyday practice. As you get farther down the road, it becomes more and more about being very detail oriented with your technique and paying attention to everything that you're doing to get just exactly the sound that you want, and having that be the tool that you use to interpret the music that you're playing. What would you say that the Irish fiddle music brings to the table that would be different from that tradition?
Well, the biggest difference is the community. With Irish music is social. We have, it's from playing for dances, it's from playing for sessions. You think about when you go to a classical concert, there's kind of the fourth wall almost, right? You're playing here, you don't want to be interrupted, right? Nobody hoots and hollers in the middle of it. You're not communicating with the audience per se. I mean, you're letting the music communicate to the audience, but you are a vessel for it.
Personally, yeah.
Whereas with Irish music, there's so much more that's improvised. And so if I'm playing with my band, we are riffing off of each other. We might play it differently tonight than we've ever played it before. We might have a different emotion, right? We're making eye contact with the audience. We are interacting with each other. We are stamping our feet, and we're having this like big emotional response to the music that we're playing. So it's more of an obvious conversation. And I think that sense of community through this music makes it a really social experience, right? Irish musicians don't typically spend hours a day alone in a practice room, right? How they might play for hours a day, but it's in a pub with 10, 20 other musicians, or 5, 10, 1, whatever. And the session is where musicians just meet and play together. They don't plan in advance what they're going to play. There might be a session leader who calls the tunes, which means they just start playing a tune. And if you know it, you jump in. And if you don't know it, you listen a couple times until you can figure it out and play along. And so that sense of, you're playing with people a lot. You're communicating with people. I think that can be really fun, and it can be a really expressive outlet musically. It uses different parts of your brain than classical music. In classical music, it's all about, like you said, perfecting, doing it the same way every time, right? You want to get that beautiful tone so great that every time you play that scale, it sounds exactly the same. With Irish music, it has more micro improvisation, as I like to call it, which means you want it to sound different every time you play it. That might mean different bowings, that might be different ornamentation. and variation in tone quality. And that kind of play, it's not quite as dramatically improvised as jazz would be, but there's still that freshness that comes from playing it a little bit different every time, which I think is a really wonderful skill for everyone to learn, and it can be really rewarding as well.
Yeah, I heard, just thinking, that reminds me of a quote. I can't remember who said it, but it was fiddle music and improv music of every type teaches you how to make choices.
Yeah,
Like classical music is more about finding a correct way and doing it in a very specific way, and other types of music teach you how to choose.
exactly.
And
Yeah, it's interesting because I'll have some students who are classically trained. I often teach teachers or teach, cellists who already play the cello but who want to learn folk music.
mhm.
And during my workshops, the same way. I feel like the better the cellist, right? The longer they've been playing classical music, the harder it is for them to let go of that perfectionism or that like predetermined right answer.
Yeah,
Because when they say, "Well, what are the bowings?" I said, "Well, there are no bowings.
it's whatever you
There
want.
are guidelines, but
Yeah,
those can be broken if you want it to sound different." And so, or they'll say, "Well, can I put an ornament there?" Like, I wouldn't, but you could.
yeah,
It would be right if you liked it. And there's the jazz saying that if it sounds good, it is good.
mm,
And that's a really hard thing to teach if it when in classical music it's if that's what the composer intended, then it is good.
right.
This is if it's all about every musician becomes a composer basically.
Yeah,
You have to you get to own part of that, which is really exciting.
yeah. Oh, that's neat. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm branching off 100 different times now, but like, there's the album that Yo-Yo Ma did with Edgar Meyer, which I'm sure you've come across. And if you read the album insert, it's entirely the story about how long it took Edgar Meyer and whomever else was in that recording. I can't pull up any other names right now. But how long it took them to kind of break Yo-Yo Ma out of his classical way of thinking, and how the whole album is basically just this journey of kind of finding the balance between Yo-Yo Ma's, decades of one way of thinking into, like, yeah,
Yeah.
different things.
Well, and I think Yo-Yo Ma is a fantastic example of continually breaking those boundaries.
Mm,
I really admire him as a person because he has put himself out there,
yeah,
right? He's played with, you know, Edgar Meyer, right? He's played with so many people, and his Silk Road ensemble is continually confronting his um, classical instincts by learning more and more. And I think I just really admire him for that.
yeah. So here's a question that I ask everyone, and answers are always fascinating. If you could think of, and there's obviously there's many, but one moment in your life where you have felt that music has really transformed you.
One moment that stands out is when I was a teenager. I went to the New Directions Cello Association Festival. But it was such a pivotal experience for me because I was probably 16, and it was the first time that I had been surrounded by other cellists who were breaking boundaries and trying new things and experimenting. And it was just so freeing and so inspiring. It was one of these communities where the participants and the guest artists all mingled together, and there were jams. People played all night in the dorms, and it was really wonderful. And it was the first time I'd ever tried free improv, and I just remember this moment of improvising with this group of cellists, and it was like the roof lifted off the building. It was just such an amazing experience to say, we are creating this together, right? We are like talking about the community of music, right? We are working together, collaborating in real time. No one knows where this is going to go, but we're all bringing something to the table. And I think that was a really pivotal moment for me to realize I had a voice to contribute. I could make something beautiful, even if it wasn't predetermined, written in advance, and that I could hold my own. And I think through that experience and experiences like that, I really realized that I wanted to pursue music and that I loved it and it would be important in my life.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that can be a kind of a personal moment for everyone to share. So I appreciate that. Great. Well, what do you want to play for us today?
I was thinking of playing some jigs for you.
Great.
There's one of my favorite tunes is called Catherine Kelly's, and it's a slip jig, which means it's in 9/8. And then and it's just a really fun, twisty little tune. And then I'll follow that with a double jig called Kesh, which is one of the most popular session tunes. All right, so I'm going to play Catherine Kelly's first without any ornamentation, just like you would see on the page. And then I will add all the variations and nuance that make it really speak.